The emergency room doors of Seoul National University Hospital exploded inward at 3:47 in the morning. 6 men in black suits poured through like a dark wave, their presence immediately silencing the usual chaos of the night shift. In the center of them strode a 7th man, tall and broad-shouldered, carrying an elderly woman in his arms as though she weighed nothing at all. His face was a mask of controlled fury and barely concealed terror. "Someone help my mother. Now." Dr. Grace Adeyemi looked up from the suture she was placing in a teenager's lacerated arm, her dark eyes sharp despite being 22 hours into her shift. The intern beside her gasped, but Grace's hands remained steady as she tied off the final stitch. She'd seen enough drama in emergency rooms between Lagos and Seoul to know that panic helped no one. "Intern Lee, finish the dressing," she said quietly, already moving toward the commotion. Her white coat billowed behind her as she approached the group of men who looked like they'd walked straight out of a crime thriller. The one carrying the elderly woman had eyes like black ice, scanning the room as though memorizing every face, every exit. When those eyes landed on Grace, something flickered in their depths. "I'm Dr. Adeyemi. Let's get your mother on a gurney." Grace's voice was calm, authoritative, cutting through the tension like a surgical blade. She gestured to 2 nurses who wheeled a bed forward, though they kept a wary distance from the suited men. The man, he couldn't have been older than 36, lowered his mother onto the gurney with surprising gentleness. His jaw was clenched so tight Grace could see the muscle jumping beneath his skin. "She's been in pain for hours. Vomiting. Fever. Fix her." It wasn't a request. It was a command from someone clearly accustomed to being obeyed without question. Grace met his gaze steadily, unflinching. In her 3 years of medical training in Seoul, she'd learned that respect was earned through competence, not intimidation. "Sir, I need you to step back so I can examine her properly." She turned to the elderly woman, whose face was twisted in agony, sweat beading on her wrinkled forehead. Grace's expression softened immediately. "Mrs. Kang," the man said, his voice rough. "Her name is Kang Masuk. Mrs. Kang, I'm going to take care of you. Can you tell me where it hurts?" Grace switched to Korean, her accent still carrying hints of her Nigerian heritage, but her fluency was flawless. She placed her hand gently on the woman's shoulder. Mrs. Kang's eyes fluttered open, clouded with pain. She tried to speak but could only moan, her hand clutching her right side. Grace's trained eyes took in everything, the defensive posturing, the location of the pain, the grayish pallor of her skin, the rapid shallow breathing. "Right upper quadrant pain, guarding, fever, nausea," Grace murmured, already running through differentials in her mind. She pressed carefully on Mrs. Kang's abdomen, watching the woman's face. When she released the pressure, Mrs. Kang cried out. "Positive Murphy's sign. We need an ultrasound, CBC, comprehensive metabolic panel, and lipase. Now." The nurses sprang into action, but the man, Kang something, she assumed, stepped forward, his presence overwhelming. "What's wrong with her? Is she dying?" For the first time since he'd stormed in, Grace heard genuine fear crack through his authoritative veneer. She looked up at him, and in that moment, saw past the expensive suit, the dangerous aura, the bodyguards. She saw a terrified son. "I believe your mother has acute cholecystitis. Her gallbladder is inflamed, likely due to gallstones. It's serious, but treatable. We'll need surgery, probably within the next few hours." Grace kept her voice calm but honest. She'd learned early in her training that families could handle bad news. What they couldn't handle was being lied to or patronized. "Surgery?" His face paled slightly. "How dangerous?" "Mr. Kang." "Han Jaiwan," he interrupted, his eyes never leaving his mother's face. "My name is Han Jaiwan. Mr. Han, your mother is in significant pain and there's risk of the gallbladder rupturing, which would cause peritonitis, an infection in the abdominal cavity. But this is a routine surgery. We perform dozens every month. Our surgeon, Dr. Park, is one of the best in Seoul." Grace placed her hand briefly on his arm, a gesture of reassurance she'd seen work wonders with anxious families. "Your mother is not going to die. Not on my watch." Something shifted in Han Jaiwan's expression. His eyes, which had been hard as obsidian, softened fractionally as he looked at this Nigerian doctor with her steady gaze and confident demeanor. Around him, his men stood like statues, hands crossed in front of them, but Jaiwan barely noticed them. All his attention was fixed on this woman who spoke to him without fear, who touched his arm without hesitation, who made promises about his mother's life with the kind of certainty he usually only heard from himself. "Do whatever it takes," he said quietly. "Money is no object. Get your best people. We always do, Mr. Han. Grace smiled slightly. Now, I need you to wait outside while we prep your mother for surgery. You can't help her by hovering, and you're taking up valuable space in my emergency room. One of the bodyguards made a sound of protest, but Jaiwan raised his hand, silencing him immediately. His lips quirked in what might have been the ghost of a smile. You're very direct, Dr. Adeyemi. I find it saves time, she replied, already turning back to Mrs. Kong. Nurse Kim, let's get her to imaging, then prep for war. Have you ever met someone who changed your life in a single moment? Someone who saw past your walls and spoke directly to your soul? Drop a comment and tell us about that moment. And if you're invested in Jaiwan and Grace's story, hit that like button and subscribe because this is just the beginning. Jaiwan watched them while his mother away, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. The fluorescent lights of the hospital corridor cast harsh shadows across his face, making him look older, harder. His second-in-command, Park Miho, stepped closer. Boss, I ran a preliminary check. The doctor is clean. Nigerian national, here on a medical training visa. Top of her class at University of Lagos, accepted into Seoul National's residency program 2 years ago. No criminal record, no debts, no connections to any rival organizations. Jaiwan nodded absently, but his mind was elsewhere. He kept replaying the moment Dr. Adeyemi had touched his arm, the warmth of her hand seeping through the expensive fabric of his suit. No one touched him casually. People either cowered from him or approached with calculated intention. But she had reached out with simple human compassion, and something in his chest had cracked open. Find out everything else. Where she lives, who her friends are, her daily routine. But discreetly, Miho. I don't want her scared. Miho's eyebrows rose fractionally, but he nodded. In 15 years of working for Han Jaiwan, he'd never heard his boss express concern for anyone's feelings outside of his mother. This was new territory. The surgery took 3 hours. Jaiwan paced the waiting room like a caged tiger, his men maintaining a perimeter that kept other anxious families at a respectful distance. He'd built an empire from nothing, had stared down men twice his size, had made decisions that affected thousands of lives. But waiting while his mother's life hung in the balance was torture of a different kind. When Dr. Park finally emerged, still in his surgical scrubs, Jaiwan was across the room in 3 strides. Well? The surgery went perfectly. We removed the gallbladder laparoscopic, minimal invasion, quick recovery time. Your mother will be in recovery for a few hours, then we'll move her to a private room. She should be able to go home in 3 to 4 days. The relief that crashed through Jaiwan nearly buckled his knees. He braced one hand against the wall, breathing deeply. Thank you, Dr. Park. Thank you. Don't thank me. Thank Dr. Adeyemi. Her quick diagnosis saved your mother's life. Another few hours and that gallbladder would have ruptured. She caught it just in time. Dr. Park clapped Jaiwan on the shoulder and headed back toward the surgical wing. Jaiwan found Grace 2 hours later in the doctor's lounge, slumped in a chair with a cup of coffee balanced precariously in her hand. Her eyes were closed, her head tilted back against the wall. She looked exhausted, beautiful, and utterly human in a way that made his heart do something strange in his chest. Dr. Adeyemi? Her eyes snapped open, instantly alert despite her obvious fatigue. When she saw him, she straightened, setting down her coffee. Mr. Han. Your mother is doing well. She's in recovery now, sleeping peacefully. The surgery was a complete success. I know. Dr. Park told me. Jaiwan stepped into the room, and Grace noticed that his bodyguards remained outside, giving them privacy. He also told me that you saved her life. That your quick diagnosis made all the difference. Grace shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. I was doing my job. No. Jaiwan's voice was firm. You were doing more than your job. You treated my mother with kindness. You treated me with respect even when I came in here acting like. He searched for the word. Like a terrified son trying to control an uncontrollable situation? Grace offered, a small smile playing at her lips. Exactly that. Jaiwan found himself smiling back, a rare genuine expression that transformed his face from intimidating to handsome. I want to thank you properly. Please, allow me to take you to dinner. Grace's eyebrows rose. Mr. Han, that's not necessary. Really, I was just doing your job, I know. But I'm not asking as a grateful family member. I'm asking as a man who would very much like to get to know the woman who told him to get out of her emergency room. His eyes held hers, and Grace saw something vulnerable there, something that made her pause. She should say no. She knew she should. This man radiated danger, power, and complications she didn't need in her already demanding life. But there was something about the way he looked at her, like she was a puzzle he desperately wanted to solve, that made her hesitate. I finish my shift in 4 hours, she heard herself say. And I'll be too tired for anything fancy. 4 hours, Jaiwan repeated, his smile widening. I'll be here. He was true to his word. When Grace emerged from the hospital at 8 in the morning, squinting in the early sunlight, Jaiwan was waiting beside a sleek black car. He'd changed from his suit into dark jeans and a simple black sweater that somehow made him look both more approachable and more dangerous. You look exhausted, he observed. 26-hour shift, Grace replied, stifling a yawn. I'm not exactly at my most charming right now. I disagree. Jaiwan opened the car door for her. Where would you like to eat? Grace slid into the car, the leather seat so comfortable she nearly groaned. Somewhere quiet. And please, no seafood. I can't handle the smell after the night I've had. Jaiwan instructed his driver in rapid Korean, then turned to Grace. I know a place. Small, family-owned, best bibimbap in Seoul. And it's quiet at this hour. The restaurant was tucked away in a narrow street in Insadong, the kind of place tourists never found. The elderly woman who ran it greeted Jaiwan with obvious familiarity and didn't even blink at his bodyguards, who positioned themselves discreetly outside. You come here often? Grace asked as they settled into a private corner booth. My mother used to bring me here when I was a child. Before. Jaiwan trailed off, his expression darkening. Before things changed. Grace waited, giving him space to continue or not. It was a skill she'd learned as a doctor, sometimes silence was the best medicine. I grew up poor, Jaiwan said finally, his fingers tracing patterns on the table. My father died when I was 8. Drunk driver. My mother worked 3 jobs to keep us fed, to keep me in school. She cleaned offices at night, worked in a factory during the day, took in laundry on weekends. She never complained, never let me see her cry, but I knew. I knew we were one bad month away from being on the streets. That must have been terrifying, Grace said softly. It was. But it also taught me that the world doesn't care about your struggles. No one was going to save us. I had to save us. His eyes met hers, hard and honest. So I did. In ways that weren't always legal or moral. But I made sure my mother never had to work herself to death again. I made sure she had a home, security, everything she'd sacrificed for me. Grace absorbed this, understanding the subtext. And now you're the one people are afraid of. Yes. Jaiwan didn't look away. Does that scare you? Should it? Grace countered. Probably. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Most people can't get away from me fast enough once they know who I am. I'm not most people, Mr. Han. Grace leaned forward. I grew up in Lagos. I've seen poverty, violence, corruption. I've treated gunshot victims in hospitals where we barely had enough supplies. I've held the hands of dying patients while their families wailed outside. Life has taught me that people are complicated. Good people sometimes do bad things. Bad people sometimes do good things. And everyone has a story that made them who they are. The food arrived, steam rising from the stone bowls, but neither of them moved to eat. Jaiwan was staring at Grace like she'd just spoken in a language he'd forgotten existed. Tell me your story, he said quietly. Please. Grace picked up her chopsticks, buying herself a moment to gather her thoughts. My father was a doctor. A good one. He ran a small clinic in one of Lagos's poorest neighborhoods, treating people who couldn't afford the big hospitals. He never turned anyone away, even when they couldn't pay. My mother thought he was foolish, throwing away money we needed, but he always said the same thing, Grace, medicine is a calling, not a business. She paused, mixing the vegetables and rice in her bowl. He died when I was 16. Malaria. The irony wasn't lost on anyone, a doctor who spent his life saving others, dying from a preventable disease because he'd given away so much that we couldn't afford his own treatment until it was too late. Jaiwan's hand moved across the table, covering hers. The gesture was instinctive, comforting, and Grace found she didn't want to pull away. I'm sorry, he said, and she could hear that he meant it. Thank you. After he died, I had a choice. I could be angry at him for leaving us with nothing, or I could honor what he tried to teach me. So I studied. I worked 3 jobs like your mother, put myself through medical school, and when Seoul National offered me a residency position, I took it. Even though it meant leaving everything familiar behind. That takes courage, Jaewon said. Or stubbornness. Grace smiled. My mother still thinks I'm crazy. Grace, why Korea? Why not London or America? But I wanted to go somewhere that would challenge me, somewhere I could learn from a completely different medical system. Plus, the scholarship was generous. They ate in comfortable silence for a while, and Grace realized how rare this was, sitting with someone who didn't need to fill every moment with chatter, who understood that silence could be its own form of communication. Can I ask you something? Grace said finally. And I want you to be honest with me. Jaewon set down his chopsticks. Always. What exactly do you do? I mean, I'm not naive. Men don't travel with 6 bodyguards because they run legitimate businesses. But I need to know what I'm walking into here. The question hung between them. Jaewon could lie, could deflect, could tell her it was better if she didn't know. But something about Grace's direct gaze, her unflinching honesty, demanded the same in return. I run an organization, he said carefully. We control territory in Seoul and Busan. Protection, mostly. Businesses pay us to ensure their safety, their smooth operation. We also have interests in nightclubs, real estate, some import-export operations. Import-export of what? Some of it's legitimate. Some. He trailed off. Some of it isn't. I won't lie to you, Grace. I've done things I'm not proud of. I've hurt people who threatened what's mine. I've made decisions that keep me awake at night. But I've also protected hundreds of families, given jobs to people no one else would hire, kept neighborhoods safe from worse predators than me. Grace processed this, her medical mind cataloging the information like symptoms of a complex diagnosis. Have you ever killed anyone? The bluntness of the question would have shocked most people, but Jaewon appreciated it. Yes. In self-defense, and in defense of my people. I'm not a murderer, Grace, but I'm not innocent either. And if I walk away right now? If I decide this is too much? Then I'll have my driver take you home, and you'll never see me again. Except when you're checking on my mother's recovery. Jaewon's voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed his tension. But I hope you won't. Because in 26 hours of knowing you, you've made me feel more human than I have in years. Grace stared at him, this dangerous man who spoke with such raw honesty, who looked at her like she held something precious he'd lost long ago. Every rational part of her brain screamed to walk away, to go back to her safe, predictable life of hospital shifts and medical journals. But there was another part, the part that had moved halfway across the world seeking challenge and meaning, that wanted to know what happened next. I need ground rules, she said finally. If we're going to do this, whatever this is, I need complete honesty. Always. I don't care if the truth is ugly or complicated. Lies are the one thing I can't forgive. Agreed. Jaewon's relief was palpable. And I'm not giving up my career. I worked too hard to get here. My work comes first. I wouldn't ask you to. And if things get dangerous, if your world starts threatening mine, we end this. Cleanly. No drama, no games. Jaewon hesitated at this one, but finally nodded. If that's what you want. It's what I need. Grace picked up her chopsticks again. Now, tell me about your mother. What was she like when you were growing up? The shift in topic was deliberate, moving them from heavy negotiation to something more human. Jaewon's face softened immediately. She was everything. Strict when she needed to be, but always warm. She used to sing while she cooked, old folk songs from her village. And she had this way of looking at me, like she could see straight through any lie or excuse. Sounds like my mother, Grace laughed. She still calls me every Sunday to lecture me about not being married yet. Apparently, 32 is ancient by her standards. You're 32. Jaewon seemed surprised. I would have guessed younger. Good genes and expensive skincare, Grace said with a wink. What about you? Let me guess, 35? 36. And apparently looking it, since you guessed right. They talked until the restaurant began filling with the lunch crowd. Grace learned about Jaewon's love of old movies, his secret talent for cooking, his fear of heights that he'd never admitted to anyone. Jaewon learned about Grace's terrible singing voice, her obsession with mystery novels, the homesickness that still hit her some mornings when she woke up in Seoul. When Jaewon's phone buzzed with an update about his mother, Grace insisted on going back to the hospital to check on her personally. They found Mrs. Kang awake, weak but alert, her eyes brightening when she saw her son. "Iyama," Jaiwan said softly, taking her hand. "How are you feeling?" "Like someone removed an organ from my body," Mrs. Kong replied with dry humor. Her eyes shifted to Grace, standing respectfully back. "And who is this beautiful young woman?" "This is Dr. Adeyemi. She's the one who diagnosed you, who saved your life." Mrs. Kang's expression shifted to one of deep gratitude. "Come here, child. Let me see you properly." Grace approached, and Mrs. Kang reached out with her free hand, taking Grace's in a surprisingly strong grip. "Thank you. Thank you for saving this old woman's life." "You're very welcome, Mrs. Kang. But you're not old, just experienced." Grace checked the monitors, the 4-drip, the surgical dressing with practiced efficiency. "Everything looks good. You're healing beautifully. In a few days, you'll be back home causing trouble for your son." Mrs. Kang laughed, then winced. "Don't make me laugh, doctor. It hurts." But her eyes were twinkling as they moved between Grace and Jaiwan. "My son seems quite taken with you." "Iyama." Jaiwan's ears reddened. "What? I'm old and nearly died. I can say what I want." Mrs. Kang squeezed Grace's hand. "You're different from the other girls he brings around. You have kind eyes but a strong spirit. I like that. Before you hit that next button, pause for a second. Have you ever had to choose between playing it safe and taking a risk on something that could change everything? What would you do if you were Grace? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you're hooked on this story, smash that like button and subscribe because Jaiwan and Grace's journey is about to get a lot more complicated. Trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. Grace felt her cheeks warm. "Thank you, Mrs. Kang. That means a lot." As they left the room, Jaiwan's phone buzzed again. He glanced at it, and Grace saw his expression shift, the softness replaced by something harder, more alert. "Problem?" she asked quietly. "Work. Nothing urgent, but I need to handle it." He looked at her apologetically. "Can I call you later?" "I'll be sleeping for the next 12 hours, Grace said. "But yes, call me." 3 weeks passed in a blur of stolen moments and late-night conversations. Jaiwan would appear at the hospital with food when Grace worked overnight shifts, always respectful of her work, never demanding more time than she could give. They took walks along the Han River when her schedule allowed, talking about everything and nothing. He introduced her to hidden corners of Seoul she'd never discovered in her 2 years living there, tiny bookshops in Bukshin, late-night pojangmaka where the soju flowed freely, quiet temples where the city noise faded to nothing. Grace found herself falling, and it terrified her. She'd had relationships before, but nothing like this. Nothing that made her heart race when her phone buzzed, nothing that made her smile at random moments during surgery prep, nothing that felt both dangerous and safe at the same time. Her best friend, Joy, a fellow Nigerian doctor at the hospital, noticed immediately. "You're glowing," Joy said one evening as they changed out of their scrubs. "And you've been checking your phone every 5 minutes for the past week. So who is he?" "It's complicated," Grace hedged. "It's always complicated. But you look happy, so he must be doing something right." Joy pulled her hair into a ponytail. "Just be careful, okay? Seoul can be tough for women like us. Don't let some man make you forget your worth." "I won't," Grace promised. But as she walked out to find Jaiwan waiting by his car, she wondered if she was already in too deep to back out safely. That night, he took her to his penthouse for the first time. It was sleek, modern, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Seoul skyline. But what caught Grace's attention were the small details, the photographs of Mrs. Kang on the mantel, the well-worn books on the shelves, the piano in the corner. "You play?" she asked, touching the keys lightly. "My mother insisted I learn when I was young. Said it would give me discipline." Jaiwan came to stand beside her. "I haven't played in years. Play something for me." He hesitated, then sat down. His fingers moved over the keys, picking out a melody that was both melancholy and beautiful. Grace watched his face, saw the way music transformed him into someone younger, less burdened. When he finished, she applauded softly. "That was beautiful." "What was it?" "Something my mother used to sing. I adapted it." He stood, pulling Grace close. "Dance with me." "There's no music," she protested, even as she moved into his arms. "We don't need music." And they swayed in the silence of his penthouse, the city lights twinkling below them like fallen stars. It was perfect. Too perfect. Grace felt the fear creeping in, the voice that whispered this couldn't last, that happiness like this always had a price. What are you thinking? Jaiwan murmured against her hair. That I'm terrified, she admitted. This feels too good. Too right. And in my experience, that's when everything falls apart. Jaiwan pulled back to look at her. Grace, I can't promise you that my world won't touch yours eventually. I can't promise there won't be complications or danger. But I can promise that I will always be honest with you, and I will do everything in my power to keep you safe. I don't need you to keep me safe, Grace said firmly. I need you to respect me enough to let me make my own choices, even if they're dangerous. Even if those choices involve me. Especially if they involve you. She cupped his face in her hands. I'm not some fragile thing, Jaiwan. I've survived Lagos, medical school, racism in a foreign country, and 26-hour shifts. I can handle whatever your world throws at me. But only if you trust me enough to be part of it, not hide me away from it. Something shifted in Jaiwan's expression, respect, admiration, maybe even love, though neither of them had said the word yet. You're remarkable, Dr. Adeyemi. I know, she said with a small smile. Now kiss me before I change my mind about all this. He did, and it felt like falling and flying at the same time. The next morning, Grace woke to find Jaiwan already dressed, speaking rapidly in Korean on his phone. His voice had the edge she recognized from their first meeting, command, authority, danger. When he saw she was awake, he softened immediately. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to wake you. It's fine. Work? She sat up, pulling the sheet around herself. Yes. Nothing for you to worry about. But his eyes said otherwise. Jaiwan. Grace's voice was firm. What's wrong? He sat on the edge of the bed, running his hand through his hair. There's been some territorial disputes. A rival organization is pushing into areas we control. It's being handled, but it could get violent. Yes. He looked at her, his expression torn. Grace, maybe it would be better if we took a break. Just until things settle down. I don't want you caught in the crossfire. Grace felt ice flood her veins. Is this you protecting me, or is this you pushing me away because things are getting real? Both, he admitted. I care about you too much to risk you getting hurt because of me. If they find out about you, if they try to use you to get to me, then we'll deal with it together. Grace stood, wrapping the sheet around herself like armor. You don't get to make this decision for me, Jaiwan. We agreed. Honesty, remember? Not protection disguised as consideration. You don't understand what these people are capable of. Then explain it to me. Grace's voice rose. Stop treating me like I'm too delicate to handle the truth. I'm a doctor. I see the worst of humanity every single day. I've held people while they died, told families their loved ones didn't make it, made decisions that meant someone lived or someone died. Don't you dare treat me like I can't handle your reality. Jaiwan stood, his face a mask of conflicting emotions. 2 weeks ago, a rival gang kidnapped the girlfriend of one of my men. They tortured her for 3 days before we found her. She survived, but she'll never be the same. That's what I'm trying to protect you from, Grace. That's the reality of my world. The words hung in the air between them, brutal and honest. Grace felt her stomach clench, but she forced herself to hold his gaze. And what happened to the people who took her? They don't exist anymore. His voice was flat, final. Grace nodded slowly, processing. I understand the risks, Jaiwan. I do. But pushing me away doesn't protect me. It just means I'll face those risks alone, without you. Is that what you want? No. The word was torn from him. God, no. But Grace, if something happened to you because of me, it would be my choice, she interrupted. My risk to take. You don't get to decide what I can handle. She moved closer, placing her hand on his chest, feeling his heart racing beneath her palm. I'm not asking you to promise me safety. I'm asking you to promise me honesty and respect. Can you do that? Jaiwan covered her hand with his eyes searching her face. You're sure about this? Once you're really in my world, once people know about us, there's no going back to normal. I left normal behind when I moved to Seoul, Grace said. I left it behind when I decided to have dinner with a dangerous man who stormed into my ER at 3 in the morning. I'm not looking for normal, Jaiwan. I'm looking for real. And this, whatever this is between us, feels more real than anything I've experienced in years. He kissed her then, desperate and grateful, and Grace knew they'd crossed a line they could never uncross. She should have been scared. Part of her was. But a larger part felt alive in a way she hadn't since her father died, like she'd been sleepwalking through her life and had finally woken up. "I need to go handle this situation," Jaiwan said when they finally broke apart. "But tonight, I want you to meet some of my people. If you're going to be part of my world, they need to know you're under my protection." "I know you don't need protection," he interrupted gently. "But in my world, this is how we show respect. How we tell everyone that you matter to me, that anyone who touches you answers to me. Can you accept that?" Grace considered, then nodded. "As long as it's clear that I'm not your property. I'm your partner." "There's a difference." "There is," Jaiwan agreed. "And anyone who doesn't understand that difference will learn quickly." His phone buzzed again, insistent. "I have to go. My driver will take you home when you're ready." After he left, Grace stood at the window, looking out at Seoul spread below her. Joy's words echoed in her mind. "Be careful, don't let some man make you forget your worth." But this wasn't about forgetting her worth. This was about choosing to see where this path led, even knowing it might lead somewhere dark. That evening, Grace dressed carefully. Not too formal, not too casual. She settled on black slacks and a deep green blouse that brought out the richness of her skin tone. When Jaiwan's driver arrived, she took a deep breath and stepped into the car. They drove to a building in Gangnam, nondescript from the outside but clearly expensive. The driver led her through a private entrance and up an elevator that required a keycard. When the doors opened, Grace found herself in what looked like a high-end restaurant, though the only occupants were a dozen men in dark suits, all of whom turned to look at her. Jaiwan was there immediately, his hand warm on her lower back. "Everyone, this is Dr. Grace Adeyemi. Grace, these are my senior people, the men who help me run my organization." A stocky man with a scar across his cheek stepped forward. "Park Miho, boss's right hand. We met briefly at the hospital." "I remember," Grace said, shaking his hand firmly. "You ran a background check on me." Miho's eyebrows rose, and several of the other men chuckled. "You told her?" he asked Jaiwan. "I told her everything," Jaiwan replied calmly. "Dr. Adeyemi doesn't appreciate being kept in the dark." Over the next hour, Grace met the rest of Jaiwan's inner circle. There was Kim Taejun, who handled their real estate operations. Lee Sangwoo, in charge of security. Choi Jae-min, their financial strategist. Each man assessed her with varying degrees of skepticism and curiosity. Grace met their gazes steadily, answering questions about herself when asked, asking her own questions in return. "So you're a doctor," Taejun said over dinner. "What do you think about what we do?" It was a test. Grace could feel everyone waiting for her answer. "I think you're men who've chosen a particular path for particular reasons. I think life is complicated and people are more than their worst choices. And I think if Jaiwan trusts you with his life and his mother's safety, then you must have some redeeming qualities." "Diplomatic," Sang-woo observed. "But do you judge us?" "I judge everyone," Grace replied. "It's part of being a doctor. You assess, you diagnose, you decide on treatment. But judgment isn't the same as condemnation. I've treated murderers and saints in my ER. My job isn't to decide who deserves care, it's to provide it regardless. Even to people like us?" Jae-min asked quietly. Grace looked at him directly. "If you came into my ER bleeding, I would save your life without hesitation. What you do outside my hospital is between you and your conscience. But in my ER, everyone gets treated the same." Jaiwan's hand found hers under the table, squeezing gently. She could feel his pride, his relief that she was holding her own with these dangerous men. "I like her," Miho announced. "She's got spine. About time you found someone who doesn't cower every time you frown." The evening relaxed after that. They shared food, told stories, carefully edited ones, Grace suspected, but stories nonetheless. She learned that Taejun had 3 daughters he adored, that Sang-woo was putting his younger brother through university, that Jae-min sent money home to his elderly parents every month. These were men with families, with people they loved and protected. It made their criminal activities no less wrong, but it made them undeniably human. As the dinner was ending, Jaiwan's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his expression hardened. "Everyone out. Now. Except Miho." The room cleared in seconds, the men moving with military precision. Jaiwan turned to Grace. "You should go too." "No." Grace stayed seated. "You said I'm part of your world now. Whatever this is, I'm staying." Jaiwan looked like he wanted to argue, but Miho spoke first. Let her stay, boss. If she's going to be with you, she needs to understand all of it. Jaiwan's jaw clenched, but he nodded. The Volkov family just moved on one of our clubs in Itaewon. 3 of our people are dead. They left a message. They know about you, Grace. They have photos. They're threatening to come after you if I don't cede territory. The words hit Grace like a physical blow. 3 people dead. Because of territorial disputes over clubs and neighborhoods. And now she was a target, a weapon to be used against the man she was falling in love with. What do we do? She asked, her voice steadier than she felt. We? Jaiwan's voice was sharp. There is no we in this, Grace. You leave. Tonight. I'll arrange a flight back to Nigeria, or to anywhere else you want to go. I'll make sure you're protected, that they can never find you. Absolutely not. Grace stood, anger flashing in her eyes. I'm not running. I'm not hiding. And I'm certainly not leaving you to deal with this alone. This isn't up for debate. You're right, it's not. Grace's voice cut through his. Because I'm not your employee or your possession. I'm your partner, and I get a say in decisions that affect my life. Or did that conversation this morning mean nothing to you? Miho shifted uncomfortably. Boss, maybe we should discuss strategy. The strategy is she leaves, Jaiwan said flatly. I won't negotiate her safety. Then you're making the same mistake you accuse your enemies of, Grace said quietly. You're treating me like an object, a thing to be protected or threatened, instead of a person capable of making my own choices. Grace, you don't understand. I understand that 3 people are dead. I understand that there are dangerous men who want to hurt me to get to you. I understand all of it, Jaiwan. But I also understand that if you push me away now, if you make this decision for me instead of with me, you'll lose me anyway. Is that what you want? The silence stretched between them, thick with tension and fear and something deeper than both. Jaiwan's hands were clenched into fists, his whole body radiating the need to act, to control, to protect. But Grace could see the war in his eyes, the man he'd been trained to be versus the man he was trying to become. What if they hurt you? His voice broke on the words. What if I can't protect you and something happens? How am I supposed to live with that? Grace moved around the table, taking his face in her hands. And how am I supposed to live knowing I ran when things got hard? Knowing I left you to face this alone? That's not who I am, Jaiwan. My father taught me that you don't abandon people when they need you most. You stand with them. You fight with them. Even when it's dangerous. Especially when it's dangerous. Your father got himself killed because of that philosophy, Jaiwan said harshly, then immediately looked stricken. Grace, I'm sorry. No, you're right. Grace's voice was steady despite the tears in her eyes. He did. He sacrificed everything for his principles, and it killed him. But you know what? He died knowing he'd lived according to his values. He died with his integrity intact. Can you say the same about the people in your world who hide, who run, who sacrifice others to save themselves? Jaiwan pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her like he could shield her from the world through sheer will. I can't lose you. I won't survive it. Then don't push me away. Grace held him just as tightly. Let me stand with you. Let me be strong enough to face this. Trust me the way I'm trusting you. Miho cleared his throat. For what it's worth, boss, I think she's right. The Volkovs are expecting you to send her away. They're counting on it. But if she stays, if we protect her here where we control the territory, it sends a message that we don't bow to threats. It might even make them think twice. Or it paints an even bigger target on her back, Jaiwan said, but his voice lacked conviction. I'm already a target, Grace pointed out. Whether I'm here or in Nigeria or on the moon. They know about me now. But at least here, I'm with you. At least here, we face it together. Jaiwan was quiet for a long moment, his mind clearly working through scenarios, probabilities, strategies. Finally, he looked at Miho. Double security on the hospital. I want eyes on her 24/7, but discreet. And get me everything on the Volkov operation. I want to know how they found out about Grace and who their informant is. Already on it, boss. Jaiwan turned back to Grace. If you stay, you follow security protocols. No arguments, no exceptions. You don't go anywhere alone. You check in regularly. And if the situation escalates, if I say you need to leave, you go. Immediately. Can you agree to that? Grace considered, then nodded. As long as you promise to include me in decisions, not just issue orders. And as long as you understand that I'm not giving up my work. I have patients who depend on me. The hospital is actually one of the safer places, Miho offered. Public, lots of witnesses, security cameras everywhere. We can work with that. Fine, Jaiwan said, though he looked far from happy about it. But Grace, if anything happens. We'll deal with it together, she finished firmly. That's what partners do. The next 2 weeks were tense. Grace noticed the subtle changes, the men in casual clothes who always seemed to be in the hospital cafeteria when she took breaks, the black car that followed at a discreet distance when she took taxis, the way Jaiwan's calls became more frequent, checking in without being obvious about it. She hated the loss of freedom, but she'd made her choice and she'd live with the consequences. Mrs. Kong had been discharged and was recovering well at home. Grace visited her twice, bringing groceries and checking her surgical site. The elderly woman had taken to Grace immediately, teaching her Korean recipes and sharing stories about Jaiwan's childhood that made him blush and protest. He was such a serious boy, Mrs. Kong said one afternoon, showing Grace old photographs. Always worried about money, about keeping me safe. I told him children should laugh and play, but he insisted on working, even when he was only 10 years old. Delivering newspapers, helping at the market, anything to bring in extra one. Grace studied the photos, a young Jaiwan with 2 serious eyes and worn clothes, always standing protectively near his mother. He loves you very much. And I love him, despite the path he's chosen. Mrs. Kang's eyes were sad. I know what he does, Dr. Grace. I'm not blind or foolish. I've told him 1,000 times to find honest work, to leave that dangerous life behind. But he says he's in too deep now, that the only way out is in a coffin. Do you believe that? Grace asked softly. I don't know. But I know my son. He's loyal to his people, and they depend on him. He can't just walk away from that. Mrs. Kong took Grace's hand. But maybe he can change. Maybe with the right person beside him, he can become something better. I see how he looks at you, child. Like your water, and he's been dying of thirst. Don't give up on him. I won't, Grace promised, though fear still gnawed at her. The threats from the Volkov family hadn't materialized into action yet, but the waiting was its own kind of torture. It happened on a Thursday night. Grace was finishing a shift, walking through the hospital parking garage toward the car Jaiwan had assigned her, when 3 men stepped out from between vehicles. They weren't the security team. She knew that immediately from the way they moved, predatory and purposeful. Dr. Adeyemi, the lead man said in accented Korean. You're coming with us. Grace's hand went to her phone, but one of the men was faster, knocking it from her grip. Training kicked in, the self-defense classes she'd taken in Lagos, the simulation drills from medical school. She screamed, loud and piercing, and drove her keys toward the nearest man's face. Then everything happened at once. Her security team materialized from the shadows, weapons drawn. The Volkov men reached for their own guns. Grace dropped to the ground, covering her head as shots echoed through the concrete space. It was over in seconds, but those seconds felt eternal. When silence fell, Grace looked up to find all 3 Volkov men on the ground, subdued or unconscious. Her security team leader, a man named Huang, was speaking rapidly into his radio. Target is secure. 3 hostiles apprehended. Send cleanup crew. Grace's hands were shaking as Huang helped her to her feet. Are you injured, Dr. Adeyemi? No. No, I'm fine. But she wasn't fine. She'd just witnessed violence, real violence, and it was different from the aftermath she saw in the ER. This was immediate, personal, terrifying. Jaiwan arrived within 15 minutes, his face white with fury and fear. He pulled Grace into his arms, checking her for injuries himself despite her protests that she was unharmed. I should have insisted you leave. I should have. Stop, Grace said, her voice muffled against his chest. This isn't your fault. And I'm okay. Shaken, but okay. They tried to take you. His voice was raw. They came for you in a hospital parking garage, and if it hadn't been for Huang's team. But there was a team, Grace interrupted. Your people protected me. The system worked. And I'm here. I'm safe. Jaiwan pulled back, cupping her face. I need to end this. Tonight. The Volkovs crossed a line, and there has to be consequences. What are you going to do? What I have to. His eyes were hard, the gentleman who played piano and cooked for his mother replaced by the gang leader who'd built an empire through force and fear. Go home. Miho will take you to the penthouse. Stay there until I come back. For once, Grace didn't argue. She was exhausted, shaking with delayed shock, and she knew Jaiwan needed to handle this his way. She let Miho drive her to the penthouse, accepted the tea he made her, and curled up on Jaiwan's couch to wait. He returned at dawn, his knuckles bruised, his clothes disheveled, but alive. Grace stood when he entered, and they stared at each other across the room. It's done, Jaiwan said quietly. The Volkovs have agreed to back off. There's a new territorial arrangement. You're safe now. What did you do? Grace asked, though part of her didn't want to know. What was necessary? Nothing more, nothing less. He moved toward her. Grace, I understand if this is too much. If you can't be with someone who... She kissed him, hard and desperate, cutting off his words. When they broke apart, both breathing heavily, she said, I was terrified tonight. Not just of those men, but of losing you. Of making a mistake that got you killed. But I don't regret staying. I don't regret choosing you. Even knowing what I'm capable of. Especially knowing that. Because I also know you did it to protect me, to protect your people. You're not a monster, Jaiwan. You're a man making impossible choices in an impossible situation. And I love you for trying to be better, even when the world makes it so damn hard. The words hung in the air, I love you. Neither had said it before, both too afraid of the vulnerability it represented. Jaiwan's eyes widened, then softened. I love you too, he said hoarsely. God help me, I love you so much it terrifies me. They held each other as the sun rose over Seoul, two people from different worlds who'd somehow found each other in the chaos. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. The dangers of Jaiwan's world still existed, and Grace's work would always demand most of her time and energy. But they'd made a choice, to face those challenges together, to build something real amid the uncertainty. 6 months later, Grace moved into the penthouse officially. Mrs. Kong had recovered fully and visited often, delighted to have someone who appreciated her cooking and didn't mind her matchmaking hints about grandchildren. Jaiwan had started transitioning some of his operations toward legitimate businesses, a slow process that would take years but represented real change. Grace continued her residency, now with better security and the respect of Jaiwan's organization, who'd learned that she was brilliant, fierce, and absolutely not to be underestimated. They fought sometimes, about his overprotectiveness, about her workaholic tendencies, about how to navigate the complicated space between their two worlds. But they always came back to the same truth, they chose each other, every single day, and that choice was worth fighting for. On a quiet evening, Grace stood at the penthouse window watching the city lights, Jaiwan's arms wrapped around her from behind. Do you ever regret it? He asked softly. That night in the ER? Meeting me? Grace thought about everything that had happened, the fear, the danger, the impossible choices. But she also thought about the love, the growth, the way Jaiwan made her feel alive in ways she'd forgotten were possible. She thought about Mrs. Kang's laughter, about the strange family she'd found in Jaiwan's organization, about the man who played piano for her when she couldn't sleep. Not for a single second, she said, turning in his arms to kiss him. You're the best terrible decision I ever made. Jaiwan laughed, the sound warm and genuine. I'll take that as a compliment. You should. Coming from me, it really is. And as Seoul sparkled below them, two souls who'd found each other against all odds held tight to the love they'd fought so hard to protect, knowing that whatever came next, they'd face it together. So what did you think? Could you fall in love with someone from a completely different world? Someone dangerous, complicated, but undeniably real? Grace took the biggest risk of her life, and it changed everything. If this story moved you, if it made you believe in love against impossible odds, show some love back, hit that like button, drop a comment telling us what you thought, and subscribe because we've got more incredible stories coming your way. What would you have done in Grace's position? Let us know below.